She slid a cup of coffee across the counter to a man she had never met and said, "Whatever it is, it's not as permanent as you think." He looked up. And for the first time in 11 months, someone had spoken to him like he was still worth saving. What neither of them knew yet was that by the time that diner closed at 3 a.m., one of them would make a decision that could not be undone. And the other would finally understand why her mother had kept a secret for 22 years. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. It was the kind of November night that made the Midwest feel like the edge of the world. The town of Harlan Falls, Ohio, sat tucked between two forgotten highways, the kind of place GPS systems sometimes skipped over entirely. Most of the shops on Main Street rolled their blinds down by 8. The barber shop. The insurance office. The hardware store that smelled like sawdust and 1987. Only Patsy's all-night diner stayed open. It had been open every single night for 31 years. Through ice storms and blackouts and the year the river flooded and took out the bridge on Route 9. Patsy herself, 73 years old, with a silver braid down her back and orthopedic shoes she ordered from a catalog in Tennessee, had never once closed those doors before sunrise. "People get into trouble after midnight," she always said. Somebody ought to be awake to hand them coffee. On this particular Tuesday, the diner held 4 people. Patsy behind the counter, refilling ketchup bottles. An old farmer named Gerald in the far corner booth, nursing decaf and a crossword he had been working on since September. A girl named Maya Calloway, 24 years old, sitting on a stool at the counter with her apron still tied and her eyes too alert for someone who had been on shift since 4 in the afternoon. And a man who had just walked in from the cold. His name was Daniel Holt. He was 38. He had driven 4 hours from Columbus without stopping, without eating, and without telling a single person where he was going. There was a reason he had chosen Harlan Falls specifically. A reason no one in that diner could have guessed yet. Maya noticed him immediately. Not because he was handsome, though he was, in the exhausted, unpolished way of a man who had stopped caring about mirrors. She noticed him because of how he sat down. Carefully. The way people sat when they were not sure their legs would hold them if they moved too quickly. He chose the last stool at the counter, the one closest to the door, the one that wobbled slightly on its base, the one Maya always warned new customers about. She did not warn him. She poured the coffee first. Set it in front of him. Watched him stare at it like it was a foreign language. Then she said it. "Whatever it is, it's not as permanent as you think." He looked up. His eyes were gray-green. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He had a small scar above his left eyebrow that she would later learn came from a childhood fall off a tractor in a town not unlike this one. "You don't know what it is," he said. "No," she agreed. "But I've been working this counter for 2 years. And nobody sits in that broken stool unless they've run out of all the other options." He looked down at the stool. Then almost, barely, the corner of his mouth moved. "It wobbles," he said. "Everything does," Maya said. "You get used to it." What Maya had not told him, what she had not told anyone who walked into Patsy's diner, was that she herself had sat in that same stool once. 2 years ago. On a night very much like this one. And she had almost not come back. His name came out slowly, the way names did when people were not sure they deserved to still be using them. Daniel. Daniel Holt. From Columbus. Maya told him hers. She refilled his coffee before he asked, which he noticed. People who had been truly alone for a long time always noticed when someone anticipated their need without being told. "You live here?" he asked. "Born here. Left at 18. Came back at 22. "Why'd you come back?" Maya placed both palms flat on the counter and looked at the pie case like it owed her an answer. "Because the life I built somewhere else fell down. And this was the only floor I still knew how to stand on," Daniel wrapped both hands around the mug. Outside, the wind pushed a plastic bag across the empty parking lot. The neon sign above the diner hummed in the cold. The letter P in Patsy's flickered, the way it had for 3 years, the way Patsy refused to fix because she said a flickering light was more honest than a steady one. "I haven't been back here in 11 years, Daniel said. Maya looked at him carefully. "You're from Harlan Falls?" 20 minutes south. Corbin Creek. Something shifted in Patsy's face behind the counter. She was pretending to wipe down the pie case, but Maya caught it. A stillness. A held breath. The kind that meant something had just walked in that Patsy already recognized. Patsy had not said a word yet. But Maya had worked beside this woman for 2 years. She knew every expression in Patsy's catalog. And the one on her face right now was not surprise. It was the face of someone who had been waiting for this moment and was not entirely sure they were ready for it. Daniel did not seem to notice Patsy's reaction. He was looking at the menu board, the handwritten one with the specials, the one that listed the meatloaf and the chicken pot pie and the banana pudding that people in 3 counties drove specifically for on Sundays. "Does the banana pudding still have the vanilla wafers on top?" he asked. Patsy set down her rag. "Always has." He turned toward her voice. And then something happened in his face. Something that was not quite recognition, not quite memory, but the place between the two where the body knew something the mind was still catching up to. "You're Patsy," he said. "I am. You used to give my mother pie on the house when she came in alone on Fridays." The diner was very quiet. Gerald in the corner had put down his crossword. Patsy folded her hands on the counter. "Your mother was Ellen Holt." "Yes, ma'am." She passed. It was not a question. 8 months ago. Daniel looked at the coffee. "Cancer." It moved fast. "I know," Patsy said. "She called me." Near the end. Daniel's head came up slowly. Ellen Holt had called Patsy near the end of her life. Daniel had not known that. And what Ellen had said during that phone call was something Patsy had been carrying alone for 8 months, waiting for the right moment to put it down. That moment had just walked through the door in a November coat, ordered coffee, and sat in the broken stool. Maya took a step back without thinking. Not away from the conversation, just enough to give it room. She had learned that some conversations needed space the way fires needed oxygen. You did not crowd them. Daniel sat very still. What did she say? Patsy reached beneath the counter. She produced an envelope, white, sealed, slightly bent at one corner. She placed it between them like something fragile. Daniel's name was written on the front in handwriting he recognized so immediately that his breath caught. "She mailed it to me," Patsy said quietly, with a note that said you would come eventually. "That you always ended up here when you didn't know where else to go. She asked me to hold it until you walked through that door." Maya watched Daniel look at the envelope the way people looked at things they were not sure they had the strength to open. His jaw tightened. His hands, still wrapped around the coffee mug, did not move. "She knew I would come here," he said softly. Not a question. A reckoning. "She knew you," Patsy said simply. The envelope sat on the counter between them. Daniel did not reach for it. Not yet. And Maya, who had no reason to stay involved in any of this, found herself unable to leave. Because something about this man and this letter and this night reminded her of a version of herself she had almost lost. And she needed to know how the story ended. Patsy sliced a piece of banana pudding without being asked and set it beside Daniel's coffee. She moved to the far end of the counter, giving him quiet, the way people who truly understood grief knew how to do. The farmer named Gerald folded his crossword into his coat pocket and laid a $5 bill on his table. He nodded at no one in particular on his way out. The bell above the door chimed once, then silence. Now it was just Maya and Daniel and the letter and the hum of the refrigerator case and the flickering P in the sign outside. "You don't have to open it right now," Maya said. "I know. But you drove 4 hours." "I know that too." She leaned against the counter, not hovering, just present. "Was it just the two of you? You and your mom?" Daniel nodded. "My dad left when I was 9. She raised me alone on a school librarian's salary and whatever extra hours she could get. She never complained. Never made me feel like I was the reason things were hard." His voice was even, but only because he was working to keep it that way. "I left for Columbus at 22. Big plans. I was going to make enough money that she never had to work another Friday night. Did you?" "Enough. Not enough. You know how that goes." Maya did know. She had her own version of that sentence. The one that lived in the gap between what you promised someone you loved and what the world actually permitted. "I kept saying I'd visit more," Daniel continued. "And she kept saying there was no rush. She said that right up until there was." The coffee steamed between his hands. "I was in a meeting when she went. A quarterly earnings meeting. My phone was on silent." Maya did not say she was sorry. She had learned that those words, however true, sometimes landed like a door closing instead of opening. Instead she said, "She still called Patsy. She still planned for you. That's not a woman who felt forgotten." Daniel looked at her then. Really looked. The way people did when something landed accurately enough to hurt and help at the same time. What Maya had not shared yet was what had brought her back to Harlan Falls 2 years ago. What had made her sit in that same broken stool on a night not unlike this one. She had not told Daniel. She had not told most people. But sitting beside him in the quiet of this diner, she was starting to feel the weight of her own unspoken thing pressing against her chest like a hand. Daniel picked up the envelope. He held it for a long moment, turning it over once. His mother's handwriting was careful, the way librarians' handwriting always was. Each letter placed with intention. He opened it. Inside were 2 things. A folded letter, 3 pages, handwritten. And a photograph. Maya could not see the photograph from where she stood, but she saw what happened to Daniel's face when he looked at it. She watched something in him break open, not loudly, not with tears, but with the quiet collapse of a wall that had been holding too long. He set the photo face down on the counter. He unfolded the letter. He read. Maya refilled his coffee. She cut a second slice of pudding he had not asked for. She left it beside the first one and moved to the other end of the counter to give him space he could still feel her across. The reading took a long time. Or maybe it only felt that way. Time in diners after midnight did not move the same way it did elsewhere. When Daniel finished, he refolded the letter carefully. He placed it back in the envelope. He placed the photo on top. He held the envelope in both hands and looked at the counter and said nothing for so long that Maya finally walked back. "Are you okay?" she asked. "No," he said. "Then, yes. I think eventually." "What did she say?" Daniel looked at the envelope. "She said she wasn't angry that I missed the end. She said she knew I would make it a reason to disappear. She asked me not to." He exhaled slowly. "She said the best thing I could do for her memory was to stop punishing myself in rooms where no one could reach me and go find someone to have dinner with." Maya's throat tightened. That's very specific instructions. She was a librarian. She believed in precision. "What's the photograph?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he turned it over. It was a picture of a woman, maybe 40, laughing in a kitchen, flour on her hands, a pie dish on the counter beside her. She was looking at someone behind the camera, someone who must have made her laugh, and the joy in her face was so unguarded and complete that it almost hurt to look at. "That's her," Daniel said. "When I was 12. We made pies every Thanksgiving. I always made her laugh right when she was trying to be serious about the crust." Maya looked at the photograph. She thought about her own mother. About the things she had left unsaid. About the phone call she had been putting off for 3 weeks for reasons she could not explain rationally and could not stop emotionally. "She looks like someone worth becoming," Maya said softly. Daniel looked at her. "What does that mean?" "It means she looks like someone whose kid should be proud to carry her forward instead of sorry to have left her behind." The diner was so quiet that the refrigerator hum sounded almost like music. Maya had said those words to Daniel, but the truth was she had needed to hear them herself. For 2 years she had been carrying something that felt like guilt dressed up as loyalty. And she had been too afraid to look directly at it. Tonight, for some reason she could not name, she was about to. "Why did you come back here?" Daniel asked. "You said your life fell down somewhere else." "Where?" Maya picked up a rag and wiped the counter, the way people picked up objects when they needed something to do with their hands while the truth found its way out. "Nashville," she said. "I went to study music. Songwriting. I was good enough to get in the room but not quite good enough to stay in it. Or maybe I was. I'll never know for sure." "What happened?" "My mom got sick." "Not like," she caught herself, "not like your mom." "She recovered. But I came home to help and the semester passed and then another one, and when she was well enough that I could have gone back, I told myself the window had closed." "Had it?" Maya set the rag down. "No. I just told myself that so the leaving felt like sacrifice instead of fear." Daniel looked at her with a recognition that had nothing to do with having met before. "How long have you known that?" "About 6 months. I'm still figuring out what to do with it." "Have you written anything since you came back?" She looked at him. "Every night. In a notebook I keep under the counter." "Every night," he repeated. "That doesn't sound like someone the window closed on." Maya picked up the notebook. It was spiral-bound, red, pages swollen from use. She had not shown it to anyone. Not Patsy. Not her mother. Not the handful of people she called friends in Harlan Falls. She held it for a moment, then slid it across the counter toward him. "You don't have to," he said. "I know," she said. "But you drove 4 hours and opened your mother's letter in front of a stranger. I think I can show you one song." Daniel opened the notebook. And what he read in the next few minutes would change the direction of something he had been building in Columbus, something he had told no one about, something he had started the week after his mother died and had no idea what to do with. He read slowly. Maya watched his face, terrified in the way all writers were terrified when someone they had just started to trust held the thing they had made. His expression moved through several rooms. Quiet attention. Then something sharper. Then a kind of stillness that was not distance but the opposite. He closed the notebook. He held it with both hands the same way he had held his mother's letter. "These are real," he said. "What does that mean?" "It means they sound like a person, not a performance. It means they know what they're about." He paused. "Have you heard of Lantern Records? Small label out of Columbus. They work with independent artists, acoustic, Americana, real stuff." Maya shook her head. "I've been consulting for them the past 4 months. Helping them find writers." He looked at the notebook. "They're looking for exactly this." The diner air shifted. Maya felt it, the way you felt weather changing before it arrived. "I'm a waitress in Harlan Falls, Ohio," she said carefully. "You're a songwriter who works at a diner while she waits for herself to stop being afraid." The words hit her precisely enough that she had to look away. "I can make an introduction," Daniel said. "No promises. No pressure. Just a door." "Why would you do that for someone you met an hour ago?" He looked at his mother's envelope. "Because she asked me to go find someone to have dinner with. And I think this qualifies." Maya laughed. One short, real, slightly undone laugh that filled the diner like something warming up. "It's 2 a.m., she said. "The dinner window has passed." "Banana pudding," he said, "counts." There was one more thing in Ellen Holt's letter. Daniel had not mentioned it. He was still deciding whether it was something to carry alone or something to say out loud. But as the night wore on and the diner grew quieter and the conversation between them moved into the kind of territory that only opened at 2 a.m. between people who had already shown each other something true, he was beginning to feel the weight of it less like a burden and more like a beginning. By 2:30, Patsy had retreated to the kitchen, leaving them the counter and the hum and the flickering sign. Maya made fresh coffee. Daniel ate both slices of banana pudding with the acceptance of a man who had decided that tonight he was allowed to want something without apologizing for it. They talked about Ellen. About the way she had read to Daniel every night until he was embarrassingly old, 12, 13, because neither of them ever wanted it to stop. About the way she would drive 20 minutes in a snowstorm to return a library book on time because rules mattered, she said, especially the small ones. Maya talked about her mother, Renee, who sang off-key to every song on the radio and refused to be corrected. Who had taught Maya that music was not about perfection but about presence. Who had cried when Maya left for Nashville and cried again when she came back, and Maya had always told herself the second set of tears was relief. She was no longer sure that was true. "I think she cried because she knew I wasn't done," Maya said quietly. "And she was afraid I was going to pretend I was." Daniel looked at her. "Are you going to pretend?" The question sat between them, patient and serious. Outside, the sleet that had been threatening all night finally arrived. It tapped the diner window in small cold rhythms. The P in the sign flickered twice and held. "No," Maya said. "I don't think I can anymore." "What changed?" She looked at him sitting in the broken stool. "Someone came in from the cold and reminded me that waiting for the right time is sometimes just a long way of saying you're scared." Daniel reached into the envelope one more time. He took out the last page of his mother's letter, the one he had held back. He read one line from it aloud. She wrote, "The reason I'm sending this to Patsy and not to you directly is because I want you to have to travel to receive it. Motion is medicine, Danny. Always was for you. Don't stop moving toward things." He folded the page. Put it back. And for the first time all night, his shoulders came down from where grief had held them for 11 months. 3 weeks later, Maya sat in a small studio in Columbus across from a woman named June who ran A&R for Lantern Records. She had her red notebook in her lap. She was terrified. She read 2 songs. June asked her to come back with 5 more. Maya drove back to Harlan Falls that night and wrote until 4 in the morning. The window had not closed. It had only been stuck. And someone had helped her push. The thing Maya had been carrying, the guilt dressed as loyalty, the fear dressed as sacrifice, began to loosen the night she said it out loud to a stranger in a diner at 2 a.m. She called her mother the following morning. She told Renee the truth. That she had used her illness as permission to stop being brave. That she was done doing that. Renee was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I know, baby. I've been waiting for you to figure that out." She had been crying, but Maya could tell they were the right kind of tears this time. What had brought Maya back to Harlan Falls 2 years ago was this: she had sat in that same broken stool on a night when she did not trust herself to make it to the next morning. And Patsy had placed a coffee in front of her without being asked and said, "Whatever it is, it's not as permanent as you think." Maya had borrowed those words tonight and given them to Daniel. Because the truest things were the ones worth passing forward. Daniel and Maya texted for weeks after that night. Nothing calculated. Photos of bad coffee from gas stations. Voice memos of song ideas she wanted a second opinion on. A picture he sent of a tractor rusting in a field outside Corbin Creek with the caption, "Mom used to say this was where I learned not to be afraid of big things." Maya saved that message. She did not entirely know why. She did not need to yet. Patsy had kept Ellen's letter for 8 months. She had thought about it every single night. She had made peace with the waiting because Ellen had asked her to, and Ellen Holt was the kind of woman whose last wishes you honored completely. When Daniel finally walked through that door, Patsy felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled since the phone call. Some promises had a weight to them that only lifted when they were kept. The expression on Patsy's face when Daniel walked in was not surprise. It was recognition. The recognition of someone who had been waiting and was now watching the thing she had waited for arrive exactly as predicted. She never said that to Daniel. She did not need to. She simply sliced the banana pudding and let the night do what it had come to do. 2 years ago, Maya had sat in that broken stool with nothing but a bus ticket back to Nashville she had already decided not to use. She had been 22 and undone and unsure whether the person she had been was still available. Patsy had given her coffee and eventually a job and the kind of steady, uncrowded presence that let people find their own footing without being pushed. Maya had never forgotten that. It was why, when Daniel came in from the cold, she poured the coffee before he asked. The decision that could not be undone was not the one anyone might have predicted. It was not a dramatic moment. It was quiet. The morning after that night in the diner, Daniel drove to Corbin Creek for the first time in 11 years. He stood in front of the house where he had grown up, now empty, now with a for sale sign in the yard, and he stayed there long enough to say goodbye properly. Then he drove back to Columbus. He quit the consulting contract that had been making him miserable for 2 years. He took a full-time position at Lantern Records working directly with songwriters. He told himself it was a practical decision. He knew it was also his mother's instructions carried out in the only language that mattered. Action. The secret Patsy had kept for 22 years was one she had never expected to become relevant. But the night Daniel walked into the diner was also the night Maya finally asked her directly, "How did you know what to say to me?" 2 years ago. How did you know those words? Patsy dried her hands on her apron and looked at the flickering sign. Because someone said them to me once. Long time ago. In a place a lot like this. She paused. And I've been paying it forward ever since. Maya looked at her. Who said it to you? Patsy smiled. A stranger. I never got her name. She sat in that same stool and was gone before morning. Some kindnesses were seeds with very long roots. Daniel Holt drove 4 hours looking for something he could not name. He found a letter from his mother, a woman who could finally exhale, and the first proof in 11 months that moving towards something was still possible. Maya Calloway was pouring coffee for strangers in a town she had returned to in defeat. She left it still pouring coffee, but the defeat was gone. In its place was a red notebook, a phone call to her mother, and a meeting in Columbus that had rearranged the next chapter of her life. Neither of them had been looking for each other. That was perhaps why they found something true. Patsy turned off the lights at 4 a.m. as always. She wiped the counter. She washed the mugs. She made sure the last stool, the broken one, was pushed back into place. Because someone else would sit in it eventually. Someone who had run out of all the other options. And she intended to be there. People get into trouble after midnight, she always said. Somebody ought to be awake to hand them coffee. If you were Maya, would you have shown a stranger your notebook? The thing you had kept hidden from everyone, the thing that held the truest version of you? Or would you have kept it tucked under the counter where it was safe and unread? And if you were Daniel, would you have opened that letter the moment Patsy handed it to you? Or would you have driven back to Columbus with it sealed, telling yourself you would open it when you were ready, knowing you might never be? The broken stool is still there. The coffee is always on. And some nights the only thing standing between you and the rest of your life is a stranger who says the right words before you think to ask for them. This is Houseful and Soul Stories. Until next time, remember, the people who change us rarely announce themselves. Sometimes they just pour the coffee and wait for us to begin.